Thanks for joining us for Season 3 of the Stories Unveiled podcast. Stories Unveiled exists to create a platform for people to share hope through their personal stories of what Jesus does in their life. Each episode highlights a different guest, just like you and I, wading through this life that can get so messy. I hope this conversation proves helpful and encourages you to go live unveiled. Today, I am joined in the studio by Ryan Stevenson. Ryan is a contemporary Christian music artist and songwriter who has 7 #1 singles. He is a Grammy and Billboard Music Award nominee, as well as a Dove Award winner, and he released his first book in 2020. I'm really excited to chat with him today. Thanks for being here, Ryan.
Of course. Glad to be here.
Well, I just want to start by welcoming you, and you're here in Boise with me, recording. And
are we allowed to say Boise?
We are. Okay. We're allowed to say Boise. We just have to say Boise.
Oh, got it. Yeah, okay. Yes, I am so glad to be in Boise.
Which is where you used to live.
Yep. Yeah, my wife is born and raised here in Boise.
Wow.
Went to high school here, grew up here. Then we met in college over in Oregon. I'm from South Central Oregon, and we met in college, and then actually ended up moving over here to be a little closer to her family in 2002.
Okay.
And so we lived here for, probably 13 or 14 years. All the while, we ended up moving back over here because her grandparents needed some help.
Okay.
It was either somebody step in and help them.
Yeah.
Because they were getting old. Her grandmother had dementia. Her grandfather had like a really rare lung disease. And they just needed help. And the family was kind of taxed. And I just felt like, man, we should move over there and help your grandparents. And that might allow us, like, you can stay with your grandparents. I can go back to school and get some, because I really wanted to go back into the medical field.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And we lived with her grandparents for a number of years while I was going through paramedic school.
Okay. And helping at the same time.
And we were taking care of her grandparents.
Yeah,
and
so
we moved in with her grandparents on our 1-year anniversary.
Oh, man.
And it was
Happy anniversary.
Yeah, seriously. And it was, man, that next year, they say your first year of marriage is their hardest, but for us, it was our second.
Yeah, I can
Because we were
imagine.
living with her grandparents, and it was essentially like taking care of a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And Grandpa died 3 months after we got there.
Oh,
so,
no. So you're dealing with all of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was just my wife and I, just the two of us.
No kids yet.
No kids yet. And so, the years went by. I went back. I was going to school at that time. I got my paramedic license here in the state of Idaho and worked as a paramedic for 8 years. I was in EMS for 9 total, and I kept my license for an additional 2. So I was technically, on the car in that system for about a decade.
Wow.
And then, the music thing kind of happened at the tail end of that, and it's just been a crazy, wild transition.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask.
A lot of moving parts in there, yeah.
A lot of moving parts. So you were a paramedic. Do you miss it?
I do. Sometimes I don't miss. There's things that I do miss. I miss more some of the people that I used to work with. And,
I imagine it's a bit of a family or
yeah,
some sort of camaraderie.
100%. Yeah, like when you live at the station with people for 24 hours a day, week after week, year after year, like a lot of my partners and coworkers just became family. Like and when you experience really crazy, tragic, horrific things together.
In recovery, we call that trauma bonding.
There you go. I trauma bonded with a lot of my coworkers.
Yeah.
Because we just had that. That's what connected us. And to this day, some of those paramedics who are still down over there at the station and work there at that agency, I mean, they're some of my dearest, closest friends, because we really did experience a degree of life together that nobody else will ever have.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So tell me when you first got into music, or just have you always been a musician at heart? I haven't always been a musician per se. I
I'm really more rhythmic than anything. Drums was really my first love.
Okay.
All I ever wanted to do was be a drummer. So all I wanted to do was focus on playing the drums. Whether or not I was any good, that's all I wanted to do. And I got good enough to the point where I could play, hold my own on a drum set.
Okay.
And I grew up on, like early 90s pop music.
Same.
So like, George Michael Jackson, any 90s R&B, Boys to Men, like anything like that. That was all I was just consuming because I just loved the rhythm of it and hooks and the melodies. My youth pastor bought me a guitar.
Wow.
For a high school graduation present. And I didn't play guitar and I didn't sing and I didn't write songs.
Oh.
He just showed up one day and said, I felt like the Lord was told me to give this to you.
Wow.
And I was just so confused by it. But he gave me that guitar and I put it away. I didn't even really play it. I was actually kind of annoyed, like, come on, man. What am I going to do with that? Like, that I play drums.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do with the guitar? But that fall, I went to college and in Eugene, Oregon. And every guy that lived in my dorm, they all played guitar. And I had brought my guitar with me to school. And so my next door neighbor actually came over one day and showed me like where to put my fingers and how to play. And it like clicked. It just made sense. Like I fell in love with it. And that youth pastor buying me that little guitar and going to college and learning to play, it like awakened this whole other piece in me of being able to, share my heart, to express and communicate through music and sound, things that had just, I'm a writer, I'm a thinker, I love language. Writing and English was my best subjects in school. And so I loved like the art of storytelling and like gripping an audience and communicating something special through saying things that give people a visceral image.
Yeah. Which is what music is.
Totally. And I think that's what drives, I don't want to say hit songs, but those songs that really matter are the ones that have a visceral thing to you that you can see what that person's talking about. And having that guitar gave me the opportunity to do that in a real way. And I haven't looked back since. And that was when I kind of got started late. I was 19 years old when I started playing, and we played in our little band in college, played all over the Pacific Northwest. And I even continued playing music after I became a paramedic. And that was what was cool is, working as a paramedic, I only worked 2 days a week.
Yeah.
I worked 2 24-hour shifts.
Yeah, but then you had the rest of the week.
Then I had 5 days off. So on my days off, I would just go around town playing open mic nights in acoustic coffee shops and doing that. And I did that for a number of years until, a crazy series of events kind of took place in my life and kind of sent me into full-time music. Like that crossroads came for sure.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's crazy that just one, like a youth pastor who, whatever, God laid on his heart or for whatever reason was like, Ryan needs this.
100%.
And that's amazing.
I know. He really did have some foresight and just...
Does he know that?
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
Man. Yeah, he's still a dear friend of mine.
Okay.
And we've talked about that so many times. And he's just so quiet. He's so humble. He's like, hey, man, I'm so happy for you. Like, he just doesn't even care. Yeah. It's just like something that he did and felt led to do. But it changed my life.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, tell me so you were talking about how you love to do music that causes that visceral reaction, that tells the story. And I believe that a big part of why, like you said, maybe not hits, but I really do believe that music that becomes a hit or that really connects with people are songs that are born out of experiences,
totally.
Real life things, not just throwing some words on a page, because we connect, I believe, through stories and through real experiences. Tell me about a song that you have done that came out of a real life experience.
Sure. Man, I feel like I can't write anything worthwhile unless it's birthed from a place of experience. I mean, I can write a song in 2 seconds and it whatever, but to write, to really express those things that mean something. And I think there's something supernatural, something spiritual that happens when it just reminds me of every verse you can dig up out of the Bible that talks about with confession brings healing, and there's power in our testimony. Revelation 12, they defeated him, the dragon, by the blood of the Lamb, by the power of their testimony. And I feel like the most powerful thing about all of us, the most precious thing about all of us is our story. It is our testimony. It's the things that we live through and walk through, and the fires we face, the challenges, the trials, the setbacks of our lives, the messes we make, the bad choices we make. And even in that, the Lord Abba is so kind and brilliant that he doesn't use us. He doesn't involve us in spite of our mistakes and the messed up parts of our life. He actually uses those things. And he weaves them into the story. I don't know how, I don't know why, but he just does. And I think that because, I always said, a song birthed in the head will reach the head, but a song birthed in the heart will reach the heart. And for me, one of those songs, I feel like I try to write all of them that way.
Then what's your favorite, or what's the one that, is...
Man, there's this song that I have, and it's called Mosaic. It's such a special one to me. And I always go back and forth between that and another one called When We Fall Apart, because I wrote When We Fall Apart about my mom. That one's special for just a reason altogether, but there's a song called Mosaic is kind of becoming my tops to go, because it is exactly what we're talking about. Just the thought of a mosaic. It's a bunch of broken pieces that are fused together with a lot of love and a lot of care and a lot of precision. At one point,
it was a mess.
Those were probably garbage, discarded, broken, nasty pieces of different things that nobody really cared about. They were probably dirty and stained and scuffed up, but somebody had the wherewithal and the care and the heart to take that brokenness, to take that mess, and to clean it up and to put it together with a lot of love and care and oversight and detail, and make that thing a masterpiece, a beautiful representation of not the garbage, but the creator's heart, the author's heart. And we had this mosaic window in our little church growing up, in this little country church. I grew up in a town called Bonanza, Oregon.
That's a real place?
A real place, believe it or not. 250 people in our town.
Wow.
But we had this little country church that I grew up in, and it had one of those windows in there. And every afternoon, the sun would hit it just right, and it would cast this beautiful, colorful, just colorscape into the sanctuary. And I just remembered that, and how we were just talking. That is what the Lord does for us. We are all a mosaic. We are all pieces and fragments of maybe different pieces and sections of our lives that we've maybe not done and said the right thing. We didn't get it right, and we went through some hard times, or we did have victory, we did have joy, or we went through some defeat. All those things that the Lord pieces together are what make us us, is what makes you so special, is what makes you so unique, so powerful. And nobody has your story. And there's so much power in your story. And so that was, if I had to kind of choose a song right now that talks about that, it's kind of my favorite. It's a song called Mosaic.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a great song.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so you wrote a book titled Eye of the Storm.
Yeah.
I know there's a subheading to that.
Experiencing God when you can't
see him. Yes. But that's also a song that you have, Eye of the Storm, which I love.
Thank you.
Tell me about the book. What caused you to write a book? Because, you wrote a song called that, so obviously the book is a bit longer.
Yeah, great question. And I never wanted to write a book, ever. And I told myself, I said, I'm never going to do this.
I think it's funny when we say things out loud like that. And
Yeah.
God knows, like, oh, but you wait.
Exactly.
God
You
has
will.
different plans.
This friend of mine, he's like, man, Ryan, we were doing this interview and he's like, your story's just crazy. Like, it sounds made up. And I was like, I know. I mean, really, it's so quirky. It's so weird. It's so unconventional. He's like, you need to write your story down. You need to write that into a book. And I was like, well, maybe someday I'll just write down little pieces. Well, I had like 2 or 3 weeks on this one tour that we were going to be in the car a lot. We were going to be in a van a lot.
Just traveling.
Just traveling from show to show for like, I was going to be out for like 20 days.
Okay.
And so on the first night, I got out my computer and I was just thinking, I was praying, I was like, I wonder what it would look like if I started writing down my story. And so I just said, I'm going to just try it. But I didn't start with me, I started with my parents. So just starting with my parents, talking about their life and how I kind of came into the mix, like, inspired me enough. I was like, oh, so I, like, in a half hour, 45 minutes, I wrote this big, like, 4-page, I just couldn't shut it off. I wrote this 4-page, like, memoir about my parents and their lives. And I was like, oh, maybe, well, and then, okay, so after I was born, and I just kept, for like 13 or 14 days straight, I just wrote 65,000 words in the back of a van. I just could not shut it off. I felt like the Holy Spirit was so involved in that process and it was complete therapy to me.
Yeah.
It was so healing to go back and chronicle my life and remember all these moments where I felt like God had walked me through, and it was incredibly healing. And so that's really where it just kind of stemmed from me wanting to write down my story to being kind of a book, just an autobiography. And it's been honestly really cool to see it really impact and touch a lot of people. And sometimes I get more comments now about the book
than you do your
than
music.
the music,
Oh
which I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's so special,
Books, well, music is personal, but books can be so, like, intimate and personal too, especially if you feel like, you just wrote your story and now it's there for everybody to read.
Yep.
But it's so powerful, I believe. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of stories and sharing our stories, because I truly believe that what we walk through can help somebody. They'll read your story and 100%. They'll be able to relate to something in your story. And when we relate like that, we know we're not alone. So that's amazing. So if somebody wants to find your book and read it, and know your story, can they get it on Amazon?
Yep, Amazon. It's just called Eye of the Storm, Experiencing God When You Can't See Him. You can go to my website, ryanstevensonmusic.com.
Okay.
There's a little tab right there. You'll find everything on there. It's pretty easy to get a hold of. But
did you write the book or the song first?
The song.
You wrote the song?
Yeah. We wrote the song years ago.
Okay.
And, the song it ended up being catastrophically big in my life that it created such a wave of not just opportunity, but exposure in ways where people, like when Eye of the Storm hit, and it hit.
Yeah, I know.
I started getting emails and letters and from all over the world, flooding in of people. It really picked a scab off of those deep places of people's lives and gave people almost like a permission to share their brokenness with me. And I feel like that is what it's all about.
That's what happens when we share our stories.
Right.
Is it gives other people permission to say, well, if he can do it, or if he's going to share, then
it's the most healing thing. Vulnerability promotes vulnerability, and there's so much healing. And I found the times that I've been healed the most in my own life is when I've seen other men, particularly, share their brokenness, share and openly talk about the messed up parts of their lives. Because in that moment, it's like you realize so quickly, man, I'm not alone. And I think that's a really huge tactic of the enemy, is to get all of us thinking that you're the only one that deals with that.
That's
Isolate you and back you into a corner, giving you all that fear and shame, saying, man, you better not come clean. You better not tell anybody about that. You better not talk about these areas of your life, because what'll people think? And it's paralyzing. And what you don't understand is the second you let that out and you uncover that and you confess or you repent or you just share. I've found that in my own life, sharing, like, people that I thought would just completely neglect me and isolate from me, embraced me even more, because there's so much power in your vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And we immediately realize we're all on an even keel.
Yep.
We're just people.
We're just people. Even if you have 7, hits or whatever, and you are still just a person. And I can attest to that, because I had not met you before yesterday, actually. And you're just a real person. And if I might say, the real deal. When I watched you actually perform in a concert or hear you on the radio or sit here and speak to you, you really, it's not so much about the music or the hits or the whatever, it's about what you're doing for God's kingdom. It's furthering his kingdom, and it's allowing the Holy Spirit to move through you and to connect with people that way so they can connect with the Lord. Not so much you. It has nothing to do with you. And I feel like you really do believe that as a really popular, famous, musical artist, that it is more about furthering God's kingdom.
Thank you for saying that. And that's, gosh, I know what I'm capable of, and it's not this. It's none of this. I just love the fact that you, me, like, we just get to, at this point, participate in what Abba is doing here in the earth. And that is just being present. Day by day, you're doing your podcast, you're coordinating events, you're being a mom, you're being a wife, you're being a friend. I'm traveling all around playing music and speaking messages of hope and healing every night, and being a dad and being a husband and being a friend of my community. And it's just so beautiful when we can live, even in our brokenness, even in our weaknesses, live and really begin to understand that we are the beloved of the Father, and nothing can change that. And I feel like that's when we begin to understand that, it changes everything. It really does.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you talk about music a lot. What are you passionate about, maybe other than music? What does Ryan love to do other than...
That's such a great question.
...stand on a stage and do music? Like, I'm sure people talk when you're on podcasts or when you're on radio shows, or you talk about your music, maybe your book, but you talk about your music a lot.
Yeah.
What else do you like to do?
Oh, man. I'm born and raised in South Central Oregon, like the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
I love the outdoors.
Yep.
Anything else?
Oregon's amazing for that.
I'm really homesick, actually. Anything outdoors, any kind of, like, I love hunting, I love fishing, I love hiking, camping. I like to travel and explore. I like just to go see new areas. I think I'm passionate about my kids. Yeah. And I think probably the thing that's really gotten me the most just focused and passionate over the years is raising my boys. Yeah. And we live out in Tennessee now, so they're growing up in Tennessee.
Yeah. They were born in Boise.
They were born in Boise. We moved out there years ago, and they've been growing up there. Our daughter was born in Tennessee now, so she's our Nashville girl. But, I think all I care about now is my legacy. Like, all I think about is generational legacy. Like, what am I doing and leaving for my boys, and who are they going to be? And I want them to break every cycle that I've struggled with, that their mom has struggled with. I want my boys to be leaders. I want them to be lovers of God and lovers of people. I want them to be tender, but I want them to be warriors. That's all I focus on. And so my kids, legacy, our community, cultivating just covenant relationship with people that And I know that's so cliche these days, especially in the culture we live in. You can say all day long, oh yeah, this is my community, and we're so tight. And then like one hard thing happens and everybody bounces on each other.
Yep, like really getting in the trenches with people is really rare.
That's hard.
Yeah,
because
it's messy.
If you're going to be in the trenches with people, you're going to be subject to their drama. You're going to be really face to face. You're going to be, their stains are going to be on you. Yep. And that looks a lot different, but that covenant relationship with people is so special. It's life, and it's so different than bouncing because you disagreed with somebody politically. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, but that's just, I think that's where I'm at. That's where my wife is at. That's our phase of life. Is, you ask me what we're passionate about, it is generational legacy, community, healthy kids, cultivating that, because I want what's coming after me to be way more important than what I'm doing. I just do.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. So I ask everybody the same question on the podcast, and I would just love to ask for listeners, for everybody that'll be listening to this episode, what encouragement do you have for people walking with the Lord, like in their walk, or maybe somebody who doesn't know the Lord?
Sure.
What encouragement do you have for them?
That's so easy, and I'm glad you asked that to me. And I would just say what I'm going through and experiencing, the journey that I've been on is, whether you're in the church or out of it, or you've never been churched or whatever.
Yeah.
First of all, understand we are the church. It's not a building that sits on some corner.
Amen.
It is us. Yep. We are the body. We are the bride. It's not four walls. It's me and you.
Yep.
It's all of us. And I would say that regardless of what you think or feel from one day to the next about either your behavior or your past or your future, understand, know, take the risk, let it be settled in you that you are beloved of the Father. Mm-hmm. Understanding our beloved status is the thing I feel like that's changed everything in me. It's changed, I just can't go back to the way it was. I can't go back to the hoop jumping, box checking, religious spirited, judgmental mindset of Western theology. Amen. I can't do it. There's been an awakening that's taken place in me, and that's all I want to talk about these days. With every concert that we play, with every little interview that we get to do, is just encouraging people that God is fascinated with you.
Yeah.
Before you could keep a commandment, if your life depended on it, he was fascinated with you. As Romans 8 says, he whispers into your ear, you are God's beloved child, and you will never, ever have the fear of being abandoned. You are seated in heavenly places. You are co-heirs with Christ. That's in Ephesians. You are loved with the same measure of love and affection that the Father has for the Son. That is the gospel. Mm-hmm. That is the message of Christ. And if Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And I feel like there's a whole new generation of people who are beginning to stare and focus on one thought, that if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Mm-hmm. Because growing up, probably you and I learned that they're all different, and where do we stand with any of them from one day to the next? And that Trinitarian fellowship, that mutual perfect indwelling of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and that relationship that we were brought back into, that is the pinnacle of where everything needs to be. And I would, again, just reiterate, rest, relax, breathe, knowing that there's nothing that you can do to be outside of the loving arms and the grace of God. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Mm-hmm. Nothing can change it. You're not separated. Romans 8. So, I hope that encourages people. Relax. Yeah. He's got you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not sitting, and I don't say that to say like this kind of cheap grace rhetoric that's so pervasive now, like, oh, just go live however you want. I don't believe that.
Right.
I think there's catastrophic, disastrous consequences for our choices, for our sin. But even in our humanness, the brilliance and the care and the sovereignty of the Lord as a dad, because he is a dad. He's primarily a father.
Yeah.
Meets us even in our junk.
Yeah.
And says, I'll even walk with you through the consequences of that.
Yep.
So.
And there's nothing too big for him, and nothing surprises him.
No.
So even in our junk and our bad choices, when we inflict the pain on ourselves, he's still there, and he's like, I got you.
Amen. It's beautiful.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. And if anybody, again, wants to find your music, I'm assuming you're on all platforms.
I am. I'm out there.
You're and on your website. You're out there. You're everywhere.
Just RyanStevensonMusic.com.
Awesome.
And then everything should be there.
That's
all those little
awesome.
links
And tour dates or...
Yep. Tour, store, if you want to buy some cool merch.
Yeah.
What else? Man, you can listen to my podcast on there. You can find all my music. It's free and available, so...
Well, it's always a pleasure to have you in Boise with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on the podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
What a pleasure.
Yeah. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation on the Stories Unveiled podcast. We would love it if you would leave us a rating or review. If you would like to learn more about Stories Unveiled and our events, go to storiesunveiledconference.com or follow us on Facebook or Instagram at storiesunveiled_. The Stories Unveiled podcast is created in partnership with KTSY and Barefoot Media Ministries. For more encouragement and other podcasts, visit ktsy.org. Have an incredible day and go live unveiled.